Hi guys, Kieran here. In this video, I'm going to simplify part 3 of the IELTS speaking exam to help you improve your IELTS speaking band. First, we're going to go over some simple guidelines to help you answer the different types of part 3 questions. Then I'm going to share some of the most overused expressions in this part of the exam so that you can avoid repeating the mistakes other people are making. Then we'll go over some simple ways to structure different types of part 3 questions. And lastly, I'll share a great acronym that's helped lots of my students structure and give extended part 3 answers. So onto the guidelines. I really want you to remember this. I've taught hundreds of students, and a lot of people struggle with this part of the exam because there's no prep time and you don't really know the questions they're going to ask you. But I want you to remember this. This exam is not an IQ exam. They're not testing how intelligent your answers are. They are listening to see whether you can articulate your answer clearly. So as long as you have a nugget of logic in your answer in part 3, don't worry so much about if it's the right answer. You just want to worry about delivering a fluent, easy to understand answer. Okay? So I know idea generation is tough for a lot of people, but they're not looking for the right idea, they're looking for a fluently delivered idea. So in part 3, you're going to get a variety of types of questions that are broadly related to the part 2 topic. And these questions test your ability to talk about generalizations, opinions, comparisons, and the future. So the main guideline I'm giving you is to have different sentences to talk about those different 4 skills. In other words, do not start off all your part 3 questions in the same way. Your starting sentence should match up with the type of skill set they're asking you to show. So if the question is asking for our opinion, you may start off the part 3 question in this way. I strongly believe that blah, blah, blah. Or perhaps the question is asking you to generalize. In this case, you may say, well, generally speaking, blah, blah, blah. Okay? Or if they're asking you to compare 2 different things, or the past and the present, you may say, well, there's 2 key differences that I can think of when I consider this and that. Or if it's a question about the future, you may say, well, I'm not really big on predicting what will happen down the road, but the way I see it, blah, blah, blah. So at least try to plan different ways to start part 3 so you don't start all the part 3 questions in the same way. And that brings me to the next point I want to bring up and talk to you about, which is the most overused sentences in part 3. The most overused sentences in part 3 are, I think. So many people start out just all the questions with I think, and that's not great because I think is often a filler word. If you cut it out, the answer will still be perfectly understandable. It doesn't necessarily add much to the answer. And also, I think is an expression of low conviction. It says you're not really quite sure about it. It doesn't really define your opinion very much. So try to leave out I think and use sentences you've planned, which will just sound better. To be honest is another one, and it's often overused a lot. So if you can just replace those with sentences that are lined up exactly with the type of question they're asking you, you'll sound much better. Okay, so in this part of the video, we're going to talk about how to structure your part 3 question and how to practice answering part 3s. So to structure your part 3, the main thing we want to do is just give a simple, organized answer that's easy for the examiner to understand. So a basic skeleton of how to answer part 3 could be, we have an opening sentence, our main idea. We give some details to support it, maybe an example, and then a closing sentence. If it's a compare and contrast, we might be doing this 2 times, but that's it. We don't want to ramble and get lost talking in a circle in part 3. So that brings me to my next point, which is how to practice your part 3. And this may sound a little bit weird because it's a spoken exam, but I found that the best way for my students to practice and improve in part 3 is to write out your answers, either on paper or in a Google document or something, because this way you will develop a bank of good chunks of English to use during different part 3 questions. So if we're doing a compare and contrast and we've written out 3 or 4 of these questions in a document, you'll have a lot of different sentences that are useful for this type of question. And when you get the question, you don't have to figure out in the exam how to answer it. You just have to plop in your predetermined sentences and fit them in with the right ideas. Okay? So as much as possible, practice doing these on paper or in a document. I know it doesn't sound fun, and it's probably easier, you think, to just record yourself, but do both, but also write them out many times, and then you'll see where you're lacking in vocabulary. Okay, so the last thing we're going to do in this video is talk about an acronym that's going to help you give extended answers in part 3. And the acronym is IRERC. I stands for give an idea, which will be in your starting sentence. The first R stands for the reason behind your idea, and you can even use reason as a linking device. You can say, the reasoning behind this is, and then you talk about it. E stands for an example, where you will give an example of what you just said, and you can say, take blah, blah, blah as an example. And then the next R stands for the results of this, where you discuss the result of your example. And then the last letter is C, which is just to conclude, so we're making some kind of concluding statement. So let's look at an example of this acronym in action. So let's say the question we get in part 3 is, do you think that advertising influences what we buy? So I'll identify the question as an opinion question. So I'll start with some kind of opinion statement that introduces my idea. So I could say, sure, I strongly feel that today's adverts definitely influence how people spend their money. I've also paraphrased a lot of the keywords in the question. Then I'll go into the next part of my acronym, which is the reason. So I'll say, the reasoning behind this is that today online marketers can see or monitor what people are looking up online by using cookies and other digital tracking devices to analyze their potential customers. Then I'll go into an example of this. Take eBay as an example, or even Amazon. If you search up something on their websites, they will know that you are interested in those products, and they'll be more likely to show you other products related to that may interest you. So I've given my example, then I'll go do the next part, which is a result. So as a result of this, a lot of people who use the internet today are constantly subjected to products that they are interested in all the time. So gradually, maybe on a weekday when they're feeling low, they may give in and click on that ad and actually purchase something that they would have never purchased 10 years ago when online advertising wasn't as sophisticated. And that's my answer. It's not perfect. I pretty much come up with this on the spot, but that's how the part 3 of the IELTS exam goes. And because I had that structure prepared in my head, it becomes a little bit easier to come up with a logical answer. So again, review the acronym: idea, reason, example, result, and some kind of concluding statement, and then you'll have a nicely extended part 3 answer.